How did the scientific forensic breakthrough in the private investigation into Srila Prabhupada's poisoning take place? There had always been rumors that Srila Prabhupada was poisoned ever since 1977. But it wasn't until the advent of the internet that it became a public issue in November of 1997, 20 years later, when Mahabodhi and others discovered suspicious sounding whispers about poisoning in the background of tape recordings made in Srila Prabhupada's quarters during his last days. Of course, news of these whispers spread around the Vaishnava world and created great alarm. Several devotees then did enhancements with advanced audio equipment on these whispers at various sound studios. There was Soundtrack in Miami with George Blackwell, Skylab in Gainesville with Jerry King. Also Naveen, he had a steady stream, scores of devotees coming to his home. He would put the headphones on them and play the whispers 5 or 6 times over. Almost all of them agreed that these whispers were about poisoning Srila Prabhupada. There were 3 primary whispers. The poison's going down, giggle, giggle, the poison's going down. That's Tamal's voice and Bhavananda's giggle. Is there poison in the milk? This is just before, you can hear on the tape recording, Srila Prabhupada drinking milk. And poisoning for a long time. That's Jayapataka's voice. To which Srila Prabhupada weakly replies, to me. So now everyone was asking, why are the caretakers in Prabhupada's room whispering about poisoning him 3 days before he departed? Then attention focused on discussions between Srila Prabhupada and his caretakers in the 2 days before the whispers. These tapes had not been previously widely distributed, but now it was noticed that Srila Prabhupada had said, someone has poisoned me 3 times. And that Srila Prabhupada and his caretakers had extensive discussions about being maliciously poisoned. There was talk of murder, poison, and rakshasas, but not about bad medicine. So let's take a quick look at these discussions from November 9th and 10th of 77 with translations into English. Balaram Mishra comes to visit, and Srila Prabhupada suddenly reveals his mind to his old friend.
क्या फरमा रहे हैं?
कोई बोलता है कि कोई पॉइजन दिया है।
किसको?
मुझको।
कौन बोलता है?
यही सब फ्रेंड्स।
কে বলেছে শ্রীল প্রভুপাদ?
কে বলেছে?
কৃষ্ণদাস।
आपको कौन पॉइजन देगा, किस लिए देगा?
Who said that, Srila Prabhupada?
I don't know. It is said.
Then Srila Prabhupada changes the subject to astrology. But it's curious that Srila Prabhupada would choose to first reveal his poisoning to an outsider. And also that Srila Prabhupada heard all those friends right there speaking about his poisoning, as though he had overheard his caretakers' discussions in the background.
ये महाराज ये कोथा आप कैसे बोला आज की कोई बोला है कि पॉइजन दिए है या आपको कुछ आभास हुआ है क्या?
नहीं ऐसे कोई बोलेगा देने से ऐसा होता है। शायद कोई किताब में लिखा है।
वो कई कारण से हो जाता है, कच्चा मरकरी से हो जाता है या और कोई भी चीज़ ऐसा है उससे हो जाता है। अपन आपके लिए कौन करेगा, हम ये समझता है कि ऐसे देव पुरुष के लिए कोई मानसिक ऐसा विचार करेगा, वो भी राक्षस है।
Srila Prabhupada, you said before that it is said that you were poisoned.
This kind of symptoms are seen when a man is poisoned, he said that. Not that I am poisoned.
Yeah. Did anyone tell you that, or you just know it from before?
I read something.
Ah, I see. That's why actually we cannot allow anyone else to cook for you.
Very good.
Jayapataka Maharaj was telling that one Acharya, Sankaracharya, of the Sankaracharya line, this is a while ago, he was poisoned to death. Since that time, none of the Acharyas or the Gurus of the Sankaracharya line will ever take any food cooked except by their own men.
No, my Guru Maharaj was.
Oh.
So we see that the phrase, "not that I am poisoned," is cleverly taken out of context by the ISKCON leaders, as though Srila Prabhupada was denying his own poisoning. But it simply means that whoever told Srila Prabhupada that he had poisoning symptoms did not also say that Srila Prabhupada was poisoned. He said like that, namely the other person. Also, we have to note that they're talking about actual homicidal poisonings. Bhaktisiddhanta was also poisoned. And that precaution should be taken as to who cooks for Srila Prabhupada, lest someone poison him.
Srila Prabhupada, ওটা কি ব্যাপার হয়েছিল? Mental distress?
बोलिए
वही बात है, कोई हमको पॉइजन किया।
अच्छा, उन्हें सोचने लगी कोई।
यदि देखिए बात यह है कि हो सकता है किसी राक्षस ने दिया हो, चारों स्वामी किसी राक्षस ने दिया हो, ये हो।
Then the Kaviraj says things like, some demon may have given him poison. That Sankaracharya, someone gave him poison. For 6 months he suffered. Bottle glass was ground and fed to him in his food. Leprosy spread in his body. Tamal asks, Prabhupada was thinking that someone had poisoned him? Dr. Charu says, yes.
I was thinking that someone poisoned him.
Yeah.
That was the mental distress.
Yeah.
तो ये बोलते हैं तो इसमें कुछ न कुछ सत्यता है, इसमें कोई संदेह नहीं।
What the Kaviraj?
He said that when Srila Prabhupada is saying that there must be something truth behind it.
Then the Kaviraj again speaks of homicidal poisoning, how some demon can put poison in the milk, and by the morning one's whole life can be forgotten. Then Tamal asks the big question, to which Srila Prabhupada never answered.
Srila Prabhupada, Shastriji says that there must be some truth to it if you said that. So who is it that has poisoned?
Then they all chatter about the recent Swarup Guha murder case in Calcutta, where a man poisoned his wife. The ISKCON lawyer Banerjee represented Swarup Guha, about which Bhavananda snickers. The caretakers then discussed the poisonings of Prahlad and Mirabai. Then Tamal summarizes the whole discussion about Srila Prabhupada's poisoning with a classic dismissal, which basically says, why worry about poison? Just chant Hare Krishna.
No poison is strong enough to stop the Harinam, Srila Prabhupada.
बस
Okay, there's a few important points to be made here. One is that the poisoning was not discussed, as far as we know, again, before Srila Prabhupada departed, or for the next 20 years. Two, that the poison whispers come the day after Srila Prabhupada said someone has poisoned me. Is this coincidental or what? Three, it appears that Srila Prabhupada just wanted us to know about the poisoning, while he himself had accepted it and didn't want to make much of a fuss about it. Of course, we as disciples must take a different attitude. Four, many devotees accept these poison discussions as the best evidence that Srila Prabhupada was poisoned because he himself says so. Next, the GBC chairman, Madhu Sevita, used his emergency executive powers without consulting the full GBC to appoint Balavanta, a former GBC chairman and now a private attorney, as a special investigator to look into this matter, giving him only a few $1,000s, all he would ever get. Soon it became clear that Balavanta had received a hush order from the GBC, and there was no news, no updates. Actually, we found through the grapevine that there was very little progress. After all, he was just one man, he was a busy attorney, and he had no money to work with. Also, the ISKCON leaders were throwing cold water on what they called the poison theory. They could not hear the poison word in the whispers, and they advised us to wait for Balavanta's results, but none were forthcoming for 2.5 years. Rochan proposed that we make an audio CD for wide distribution to the devotees, and he located a sound studio that we could use at a Jagannath Das Puripad's ashram in Lockport, New York. Dineshwar went there for 2 months, and he worked on arranging a narration with the poison whispers, Srila Prabhupada's statements about someone has poisoned me, the poison discussions thereof, and Tamal's telling Srila Prabhupada, now you have to choose which suicide, and much more. The day the CD was finished, Jagannath Das Puripad had a horrible fit of anger that sent Dineshwar running off to the bus station. The CD disappeared. It was stolen, but it soon turned up in Germany with Harikesh Company, to whom it had been sold. Harikesh organized a ministry for the protection of ISKCON, which produced a rebuttal to what they called the poison CD. They said the poison theory was malicious, perpetrated by envious persons out to destroy the movement, intent on blaspheming Srila Prabhupada and his senior loving disciples. This was how those who simply wanted to find out the truth were painted black. This was when some of us came together as a loose-knit committee decided to do our own investigation. So the ISKCON leaders did not take Srila Prabhupada's statements about someone has poisoned me seriously at all. In 1977, they were clearly acknowledging that he was talking about malicious poisoning. Yet 20 years later, in 1997, they mysteriously said, Srila Prabhupada said he was not poisoned. Plus they couldn't hear, or they pretended not to be able to hear, the poison word in the whispers. So this was all very disappointing. Now those who did have faith in Srila Prabhupada's words and wanted the truth to be established saw the need for scientific forensic evidence to confirm Srila Prabhupada's statements. For example, some devotees thought they had found a fourth whisper, put poison in different containers, but actually it turned out to be their voicing different opinions. So we could see there was a need to determine scientifically what was actually in the whispers, not just what someone thought they were hearing. We found that audio forensics is a well-established science, widely accepted by courts and law enforcement. So we decided to see if the poison whispers could be scientifically certified. And I set up an extensive audio forensic analysis with Jack Mitchell at Computer Audio Engineering in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He was an expert in the science of speech, which is based on the works of J.M. Pickett's Sounds of Speech Communication and Acoustic Analysis of Speech by Kent and Reed. He had $250,000 worth of audio equipment and an impressive resume. He studied the whispers with the original tape recorder and a direct audio tape from the Bhaktivedanta archives. He used wideband voice spectrographs with advanced computer software to determine phonemes, diphthongs, and so on. He verified the three primary whispers as having the poison word, and he found many secondary whispers as well, such as Tamal saying, "He's as sly as they come," and "We know he's trying to trap us," referring to Srila Prabhupada. Study cost over $16,000. Someone had referred me to a book on Napoleon's poisoning, which described how hair tests 150 years after Napoleon's death had found high levels of arsenic. Now, we could not do tests on Srila Prabhupada's body, but we could test his hair. Many devotees had hair samples given to them by Srila Prabhupada's servants in the 1970s, which they kept as sacred relics, or tadiya. I had one myself. So I decided to take half of my Srila Prabhupada hair sample to a local chemist, Dr. Wadlin in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, who tested it twice for mercury. It was normal. This meant that either Srila Prabhupada was not poisoned with mercury, or that the hair was from a time when there was no poisoning with mercury. We didn't know what to test for. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack, which is why a slow, secret poisoning is very difficult to discover. Also, we came to see that we needed to find a testing technique that would not consume so much hair, because Srila Prabhupada's hair samples, especially from his last year when he would have been poisoned, were very tiny in size and very scarce. Also, upon studying Srila Prabhupada's health history from mid-1976 and on, We saw an unexplained, undiagnosed illness with a parade of doctors who all differed in their assessments and treatments. Jennifer at the American College of Forensic Examiners had told me about neutron activation analysis, which could determine the total elemental contents in even tiny amounts of material, such as a few pieces of hair. I chose a Dr. Chat at Dalhousie University in Nova Scotia, who had written a book on hair analysis. He used neutron activation analysis to test some more of my Srila Prabhupada hair sample, but this time for arsenic. It was more or less normal. We tried to find some more hair samples to test, but had no luck. Yamuna had one from 1977, but she didn't reply our inquiry. One day I called Balavanta. He was very tight-lipped about his own investigation, but I suggested to him that he should test Srila Prabhupada's hair from 1977 with a Dr. Stephen Morris at the University of Missouri, whom I'd already spoken to at length. Dr. Morris had taken a great interest in our project of determining whether Srila Prabhupada, the founder of the Hare Krishna movement, had been poisoned in 1977. He had one of the world's most advanced nuclear testing facilities. He did super accurate neutron activation analysis, and he had offered to do a series of tests for free, pro bono, out of academic interest. He was the kind of scientist that studied Peruvian and Aztec mummies and so on. He would submerge the hair in a tiny capsule in under 30 feet of water, bombard it with radiation, and then measure the radiation that came from the sample. So Balavanta was interested, and he took Dr. Morris's number. Then in early 1999, this is where things got really interesting. Naveen Krishna called me. He said that Hari Sari had taken Srila Prabhupada's hair clippers from the Vrindavan Prabhupada Museum and given them to Balavanta, who had sent them on to Dr. Morris, who had done a hair test and had found some very significant new evidence. But Naveen wouldn't tell me what it was. So I called Dr. Morris myself, who, taking me to be working with Balavanta, explained to me how he had found some pieces of hair stuck between the cutter blades on the hair clippers, which he washed out and tested, finding 2.6 parts per million of arsenic. Dr. Morris described this as about 20 times more than normal. While not a lethal amount by itself, even over many months, it was not normal either. It was significantly elevated. The normal, unexposed person has about 0.13 parts per million arsenic in their hair. And the United Nations says that 1 part per million is the starting point of chronic arsenic poisoning. Balavanta also later solicited an expert opinion from the Chief Medical Examiner of the state of Delaware, Dr. Richard Callery, who stated that 2.6 parts per million of arsenic in a person of Srila Prabhupada's age and health would be considered to be a significant contributing factor in his demise. So this arsenic level was not normal, as the ISKCON leaders would later insist. So now we had the poison whispers, Srila Prabhupada himself stating several times that someone has poisoned me, with the extensive discussions between Srila Prabhupada and his caretakers about actual homicidal poisoning, and now abnormally elevated levels of arsenic in Srila Prabhupada's hair. And still, the GBC was denying that there was any evidence at all. Also, they were not sharing any of the developments in Balavanta's secret investigation. So our private investigative committee thought that this was not right, and that it was only fair that the devotees should be openly presented with the evidence. They were all waiting to know what had happened in Srila Prabhupada's final pastimes. So we decided to publish all the evidence up to that point as a book. And in May of '99, 2,000 Someone Has Poisoned Me books were sent out for free. The evidence, now public, was a shockwave that really deeply impacted the Hare Krishna movement. 400 pages of evidence, the whispers tests, Srila Prabhupada with his caretakers and their conversations about poisoning, the arsenic test results, witnesses, testimonies, medical history, misdiagnoses, the suspects, and all about the sciences of hair analysis and audio forensics. Now the ISKCON leaders' denials were seriously challenged. Then in March of 2000, Balavanta finally gave his report on his official ISKCON investigation into Srila Prabhupada's poisoning at the annual GBC meetings in Mayapur. His report included tests on some of Srila Prabhupada's medicines with nothing abnormal, the arsenic test on Srila Prabhupada's hair, and an audio forensic study done by J.P. French in London. This firm did a lot of government work on terrorism, such as examining Osama bin Laden's tapes. He was given a very poor quality copy of a copy tape to work with, but still he was able to determine that the poison word was in the whispers. So Balavanta then concluded that his investigation was not complete and that further investigation was recommended, but with proper funding. GBC thanked him and he stepped aside. Then the GBC revealed the results of a second secret investigation, which was unknown to Balavanta, the official investigator, and unknown to anyone except the elite leadership. This project was organized by the poison suspects themselves. They had printed a book called Not That I Am Poisoned, organized by a disciple of the chief suspect, Tamal, written by a disciple of Jayapataka, another suspect, and financed by Bhakti Charu Swami, another suspect. So you have the suspects investigating the matter in which they're suspected. Does this make any sense? The truth behind Srila Prabhupada's glorious passing? No, it's not the truth. This is a whitewash cover-up, cover to cover, full of lies, deceit, hypocrisy, fraud, trickery, ridicule, and word-jugglery. All to confuse and divert attention from the actual evidence. They also tried to discredit spectrographic speech analysis and the science of hair analysis itself. They sifted through the scientific literature to find 2 outlier references for arsenic levels above 3 parts per million, as though that would prove that Srila Prabhupada actually had normal levels of arsenic in his hair. But the normal level is 0.13 parts per million. They went to great lengths to assassinate the character of the poison conspiracists, as though that would negate the evidence itself. But no one on the committee, now called the Truth Committee, made up any of this evidence, which should be examined on its own merits. They brought in the flamboyant Jagannath Das Puripad to claim that we tried to tamper with the whispers in the tape recordings. Now, how could anybody expect to get away with that? The originals are in the archives. Many ISKCON leaders in this book, including all the suspects themselves, characterize the poison theorists as agents of Kali, blasphemers, having emotional problems, envious former devotees, etc. They say that the poison whisperers don't exist, that they can be whatever you want them to be. They actually say in this book, get this, that when Srila Prabhupada was talking about someone has poisoned him, that these are the senile ramblings that you cannot take seriously, that are culturally typical of elderly Vaishnava Bengalis at the point of death. They just complain about things. Is this really how we should be thinking about Srila Prabhupada? Also, they want us to believe that Srila Prabhupada denied his own statements of someone is poisoning by extracting a phrase out of context, namely, not that I am poisoned. They say Prabhupada only had the symptoms of poisoning, but to have poisoning symptoms would strongly suggest poisoning, wouldn't it? Plus, in the discussions on November 9th and 10th of 77, all the caretakers clearly acknowledged that Srila Prabhupada was speaking of actual malicious poisoning by a Rakshasa. So why do they today falsely claim that it was about bad medicine? This again shows their total deceit. Why does someone hide something? Usually because of guilt, being afraid of the consequences. So with Balavanta's investigation sabotaged and the suspect's book, Not That I Am Poisoned, denying everything and confusing the facts and evidence, now what? Naveen Krishna organized many senior dissatisfied ISKCON devotees into the November 14th Commission to conduct a more independent investigation in cooperation with the GBC. And many signed up. Prahladananda Swami, Guru Prasad Swami, Gunagrahi Ambarish Sesha, and Mr. Patel of the Indian American Federation. They all gave statements why they thought Srila Prabhupada's poisoning should be now fully and honestly investigated. But then the GBC passed a resolution forbidding any further investigation or even discussion on the poison issue, under threat of removal from ISKCON and loss of one's position and benefits. For example, Prahladananda Swami was personally threatened by Tamal. If you don't drop this matter, I'll make sure you have no further service in ISKCON for the rest of your life. Ask him if it's true. So they all had to back out and resign from the commission. In this way, the poison issue was stomped into the ground. So the private investigative committee then decided to carry on with further scientific studies. First, we had Jack Mitchell confirm and verify his findings by a professional audiologist, Dr. Helen A. McCaffrey in Kansas. Second, we contracted another full audio forensic study with JBR Technologies in Virginia, run by James Reams, who had been an FBI investigator all his life until he retired and formed his own company. The BBT Archives brought the original tape to his laboratory, and we sent the original tape recorder to his laboratory. In this report by James Reams, he determined that the whispers do indeed contain clearly the poison words. We also engaged Tom Owens at Owl Investigations in New Jersey. He is a prominent homicide investigator and is a certified audio forensic specialist. In his report, he stated, "The word poison is clearly audible. There's conversation about poison and the use of it. A forensic toxicologist and homicide investigator should be consulted." After studying the whispers, he determined all of them did contain the poison word. So, the poison whispers are factual, scientifically verified evidence that disciples in Srila Prabhupada's room were discussing and giggling about poisoning Srila Prabhupada. The two sound studios, Jack Mitchell, Dr. McCaffrey, J.P. French, JBR Technologies, and Owl Investigations. 7 times confirmed. The whispers can no longer be disputed. The studies speak for themselves. One of the primary arguments by the ISKCON leadership is that there were only loving disciples surrounding Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, how could there be a poisoning? Did anyone ever read where Srila Prabhupada talks about demons in disguise in the Hare Krishna movement? I mean, poisoning by its very nature is a cowardly, secretive assault that no one suspects, even if there are loving people around. Also, there are many other defective reasons that they give to dismiss the concept of Srila Prabhupada's poisoning. But these arguments all fail to address the mountain of evidence that Srila Prabhupada was poisoned. So, why does the ISKCON leadership adamantly deny Srila Prabhupada's poisoning in the face of so much scientifically certified evidence? Is it because it's true and it threatens their status quo, or that maybe there are still some poisoners in the ruling GBC elite? In spite of the GBC denials, an internet poll in 1999 of devotees showed that the majority believed that Srila Prabhupada had been poisoned. It had become a classic struggle between truth seekers and the established corrupt order. We then decided to pursue further hair tests in hopes that the matter could be settled in that way. One day I was looking through the Book of Denials and noticed that the GBC assistants had tried to test some hair samples themselves, describing how they had sent them to a Larry Kovar in California and then on to a Dr. Richard Cashwell at the University of Wisconsin. However, both parties were not able to test such small quantities because their equipment was inadequate. They next called Dr. Morris and harassed him to do a series of free tests for them as they had done one for Balavanta. Dr. Morris became concerned that he would be swamped with endless tests from the Hare Krishnas, so he decided to charge them $6,000. So then the GBC had to decide if it was worth that much money to them to see if Srila Prabhupada was poisoned or not. And they decided it wasn't. So, on a hunch, I called the University of Wisconsin, and Dr. Richard Agassi was there. He was the successor to Dr. Richard Cashwell. I asked him, "Do you still have those hair samples that my colleagues have sent to you?" "Yes, they're still here on the shelf in my office. They've been there almost 2 years." I asked him to forward those samples on to Dr. Morris in Missouri. He knew Dr. Morris very well. These nuclear physicists and researchers, they all know each other. So November 1st, 2001, Dr. Morris received the package of hair samples, and we prepared to test them for the GBC. Then I emailed Hari Sori under a pseudonym, as Yudhisthira does, concerned if he knew who he was, he wouldn't tell me anything, to determine the history and identity of the 2 samples that Dr. Morris now had. Hari Sori told me, Yudhisthira Das, that is, that sample A had been collected by Devi Shakti just after Srila Prabhupada's disappearance by brushing off some of the hair stuck to the outside of the same hair clippers that Dr. Morris now had. She put that hair in a small plastic vial and on display in the Prabhupada Museum in Vrindavan. In '99, Harisori went and retrieved it. Sample D was from hair that Harisori had personally cut from Srila Prabhupada's head as his servant in March of 1977. Then Dr. Morris opened the hair cutters, the hair clippers, and found inside a few more pieces of hair that had been stuck there for 20 years. We designated that as sample Q2. So then Dr. Morris had 3 authenticated hair samples. One from September of '77, when the clippers were last used. One from March of '77, when Harisori cut the hair from Srila Prabhupada's head. And one from inside the hair clippers, date unknown, sometime during 1977. Dr. Morris then described to me how he could test 4 different elements at the same time in one test, because arsenic, antimony, mercury, and cadmium, all heavy metals, they're all grouped together on the atomic table. They have similar nuclear properties. So I thought, okay, great, do it. Between 2002 and 2005, Dr. Morris did these tests. The mercury was normal in all 3. The arsenic and antimony were slightly elevated, but in all 3. And then, surprise, the cadmium was sky high. The cadmium turned out to be the primary poison and the arsenic only secondary. So that's how the forensic breakthrough, by Krishna's arrangement only, took place. The average amount of cadmium in these 3 samples was 15.75 parts per million, or about 250 times more than the normal unexposed person in human society, who typically has only 0.063 parts per million. I tested my own hair twice, and that's exactly what I had. In the scientific literature, we could not find any examples of anyone who ever had these levels. They were unprecedented, even amongst those who were seriously contaminated environmentally or occupationally. The only way to acquire these kinds of levels of cadmium would be to directly ingest cadmium chemicals, or in other words, be poisoned in your food and drink. These levels are deadly and lethal over a very short period of time. Miraculously, as proven by the September and March '77 hair samples A and D, Srila Prabhupada had these levels for a minimum of 6 months, and if we count from March until November when he departed, 8 months. That's a long time. It is interesting that the doctors noticed that one day Srila Prabhupada's condition was very bad, and then the next day it was normal again. This may be attributed to Srila Prabhupada's being completely transcendental to the effects of the material nature. But an ordinary man would have died much sooner. So this can only be a deliberate, malicious, homicidal poisoning. It just cannot be explained any other way. Like from water, or from the air, or from shampoo. So the question, was Srila Prabhupada poisoned? Has now been answered with scientific proof. Yes, he was. This is final. For those who did not accept Srila Prabhupada's own statements that someone has poisoned me, now you have Dr. Morris's report. 6 hair tests, 3 of which were astronomically high with cadmium, and 3 which were normal because they're from before 1977. The consistencies and cross-correlations in these 6 tests show that these results are not a fluke or an error. Dr. Morris has been doing these kinds of hair tests for many decades. We can trust his results millions of times more than the motivated, corrupt ISKCON denials. It's a bit of a mystery why cadmium was used. This is not amongst the usual poisons. Who would know about cadmium and the correct doses? It hints loudly at a wider circle of involvement than just Srila Prabhupada's ambitious disciples. Anyway, next question. Who poisoned Srila Prabhupada? Well, we now have to look at the persons of interest, or suspects. They're not suspects because we have cast aspersions upon them. They're suspects because of the considerable evidence that clearly implicates them in the poisoning. For example, in our upcoming report, we have 17 chapters on the real Tamal as evidence. There's so much evidence that Tamal was involved or did the poisoning that we put him on trial and found him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, just as any jury would do. For example, there is Tamal's mercy-killing interview done just days after Srila Prabhupada's departure for Back to Godhead magazine with Satsarup, wherein he claims that Srila Prabhupada asked him repeatedly for medicine to die now, implying that Srila Prabhupada wanted an assisted suicide or euthanasia. This tape is shocking. It was found by Krishna's arrangement in a closet in 1997, by accident. This was to be Tamal's defense for poisoning Srila Prabhupada, that he was just following instructions. Apparently, Tamal was very concerned about being exposed by those who knew. He even admitted in 1980, on tape, I have always been accused of trying to kill Srila Prabhupada.
A number of times he would say, can you give me a medicine? Please give me a medicine that will allow me to disappear now. Another time he said, I want most now to disappear. I want to die peacefully. Let me die peacefully. Now, on one hand, we could take it and give him that medicine, or let him stop eating and fast until death. We could have done that. And yet it seemed that, of course, we could not do that out of our love for him.
Also, Tamal has admitted that it's his voice in the whisper, the poison's going down, poison's going down. Also, Jayapataka's voice is clearly recognizable in another one of the whispers, poisoning for a long time. In Bhavananda, many devotees recognize it's his giggle in one of the whispers. Bhaktacharya, he has so many changing stories. This, that, maybe 7 or 8 or more different versions. This is the trademark of a guilty man. Get this, in 1977, Bhaktacharya, from the tape recordings, you can see he clearly acknowledged that Srila Prabhupada was talking about homicidal poisoning. Yet by 1997, 20 years later, and up till today, he claims that he didn't take Srila Prabhupada's statement seriously because he didn't turn blue. Get that? Blue? A poisoned person always turns blue? And he's a chemist. He should know these things. How can he be saying such silly things? These suspects have never allowed themselves to be deposed or interviewed. They don't answer questions. They just blank it out. So this is a big cover-up, a whitewash. The ISKCON leadership is protecting those still in their ranks who were involved in Srila Prabhupada's poisoning. Why else have they stonewalled all attempts to reach the truth in this matter and insisted upon denying such voluminous evidence? Why? They don't want us to know what really happened. Well, now we do know what happened, and the ISKCON leaders are toast. Even those who were not directly involved in Srila Prabhupada's poisoning, they are all as responsible now for aiding and abetting, as accessory after the fact, participating in the cover-up. They have all failed the devotees and failed Srila Prabhupada. Now might be a good time to have elections as Srila Prabhupada prescribed in the direction of management. Sure, the GBC has their rationale why there's not supposed to be elections of GBCs, but we've answered that also in our report. So if our leaders have lied and covered up about Srila Prabhupada's poisoning, as is now known to be the case, what else have they lied to us about through the years? Probably a lot. Each devotee must now decide what they will support: a corrupt regime of a self-serving elite guru club, which is what they are, that doesn't care about the truth, or a restoration of Srila Prabhupada's mission as he wanted it to be.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
What will happen to the movement in the United States when you die?
I'll never die.
Die!